Welcome to the Grateful Life webcast. I'm your host, Ashley Eicher. Our topic for today's show is small spaces, big possibilities, designing with purpose, with our guests, Kim Lewis and Veronica Clifton. Kim is the founder and creative director of Kim Lewis Designs, based in Austin, Texas. She is a multidisciplinary designer with a focus in interior architecture, design, and branding. For 6 years, Kim was the lead designer of ABC's popular design show, Extreme Makeover Home Edition. Since then, her work has been featured on a variety of television networks, including ABC, HGTV, TLC, National Geographic, and FYI's Tiny House Nation. Veronica Clifton is the CEO and principal designer for RJ Clifton Designs, LLC in Houston, Texas. She is a featured designer on season 3 of Brookdale's home makeover show, Make It Mine. She has been featured on Houston's KTRK Channel 13's Stretch Your Budget segment and appeared as the guest decorator at several grand openings of Kirkland stores. She also co-founded Creative Conversations, LLC, a social peer group for Black interior designers, design students, and industry professionals. Kim and Veronica, thank you so much for joining us today to discuss this so much fun and exciting topic. It's so good to see both of you.
Hi, Ashley. So great to be here. I'm excited for this.
I know it is going to be such. Sorry, Kim, go ahead. What were you saying?
I'm just so excited. This is a topic I'm so passionate about, so I'm excited to be here.
I am too. Okay, for all of you watching at home, if you have questions for our designers on the topic of small spaces, place those questions in the chat and we are going to do our best to answer as many of them as possible later on in the show. But as we start our discussion today, I do want to mention that the topics we'll be talking about are applicable to anyone who is interested in designing their space, but especially to older adults who could be potentially moving from a larger space into a smaller space. So we have a lot to talk about today. We were talking earlier, and I cannot wait for all of the incredible insight that you are going to share with our audience. And this is going to be a really lively discussion. So feel free to jump in if either of you want to add something while the other one is talking. It's going to be great. You all ready?
We'll do. We're ready.
All right, let's do this. All right, Kim, I want to kick things off with you with a question for you kind of help establish what we're talking about today. You know, people often use the word downsizing when transitioning from a larger home to a smaller home when they feel like they no longer need as much space. But you actually have a term that I love that I think really better describes designing for smaller spaces. So can you share that with our audience?
Definitely. Yeah, I just feel like sometimes downsizing can have a negative connotation for some people. And so I like to use the word right sizing because it really is a shift in our mindset and more a positive approach of how do we create the space that's the right size for us. So many people live in a home that is actually just too big for them. And that's why I'm passionate about this, because we can engage and empower people to see from a different perspective what could be the right size. A lot of times, if the space is too big, it can feel isolating. It gives you a space for clutter. Clutter can set back our mental health. So I love the word right sizing. I feel like it's a fun twist from a design perspective and how people can move from one chapter to the next in their home.
Well, and I love how the term right sizing is just a little bit of a mindset shift that I feel like can make such a huge difference in our attitude towards this change in life that so many people go through.
Definitely. And also I love, when we right size, we're actually sometimes creating space for a positive impact on our financials, our mental health, just a better positive experience in our own home. So right sizing is the word of the day.
Absolutely. Okay, Veronica, as you look ahead to helping someone move into a smaller space, how do you get started with the design or the look and feel of a new space?
Yeah, and Kim, I might use that right size. I
Yeah,
don't
girl.
know. I like that. I like to really first talk with my clients and make sure that they understand how they're approaching their projects. One thing that I like to do is educate clients on the difference between decorating and design. And those words are really used interchangeably. And a lot of times people don't understand what they need for their space.
Yeah.
And making sure that they are approaching their project appropriately. So if they just need decorating, some people call it styling, where they're just placing objects in a room and kind of highlighting some of the areas like pillows on a sofa or drapery on your windows. Or if you actually need to dig into those design changes, whether or not you're downsizing or remodeling for ADA purposes. But design is a more holistic approach, right? So you want to make sure that you're thinking about maybe some of those structural changes. Do you need to switch out a bathtub from and have a curbless shower, or do you need to add items into a bathroom to make it stable and well? And another thing is, like, I like to look at my space like a piece of art. So it's important to really have those conversations and dig in deep from the beginning, because I don't want to change my space every 2 to 3 years or 2 to 5 years because I've just thrown in a bunch of trends when I'm styling. So I really like to dig in deep from the beginning and make sure that we're creating spaces that are timeless, are beautiful, and are really they're really blending art and function in a way that will make it timeless and great for years to come.
Well, and I feel like too, it's an extension of who you are. And so to me, like when I
Absolutely.
think about designing my house, that's what I think about. This is an extension of who I am.
Yeah, it's a very unique experience, and you can look through all the Pinterest boards and all the things that you want. I know TikTok University is great right now, but let's call that inspiration
Yes.
and
Yes.
let's really have the conversations that allow you to focus on what you need for your space. It's so important, and sometimes we can try to style or design a home based on just that inspiration, and we fall short because that space it doesn't meet your needs.
Right.
Amen.
Absolutely. Kim, what does your approach look like?
Yeah, I love every to echo. You use the word holistic approach, Monica. I fully believe that. We call ourselves like storytellers. Our job is to take someone's personality and create a space out of that, and to tell their specific story through the walls of their home. One analogy when we first sit down with a client that I love to use, and I'll ask you, Ashley, what the question is. When you go to sit down and work a puzzle, what's the first thing you do?
I mean, I sit down at a table is what I think
Yes.
of.
That is like step one. Okay. What's the next
Is
step?
that wrong? Okay.
No,
I
you
tend
know
to,
what?
I'm like,
There's no
I
wrong
sit down.
answer. There-
I
that is-
typically start with the corners of a puzzle and sort of lay the foundation. That's where I start.
That is honestly, I usually get that response. People want to start with the corners or the border, but I encourage everyone to take a step even further back. And actually, the first thing we do is look at the cover, the box of the puzzle, to see what image are we trying to create. Back to the word you used, Veronica, art. It's what is that whole image that we're trying to create. From there, we set ourselves up to be able to design something with almost like puzzle pieces in mind, especially in a smaller space. Every inch matters. And so it's really about defining the program, defining what puzzle pieces need to go into this home, and then making them all perfectly fit together as like one nice illustration.
Well, I'm glad I at least got the table part right.
You did.
Oh my goodness. When it comes to design, what are some of the common misconceptions that you see with both of your clients?
I personally love this question because I heard it for so many years. If you do a small space, you can't do, you can't paint the walls dark. You have to do everything white or light or
Yep.
beige. That is simply not true. It's about the ratio and the scale and the use of the color in the space, and other elements like what natural lighting do you have in the space. I love to go big or go home. So I'm like, if I'm going to do a small space, I'm going to paint all the walls one color in the ceiling perhaps, but you absolutely can use dark colors in a small space. I also always hear, this one's funny to me, that you can't do big pattern or no wallpaper in a small space. A lot of people love doing wallpaper in a powder bathroom. Why is that? Because it makes a giant impact. It makes a big possibility in a small space. So I love those misconceptions, and I like to prove people wrong, where when we do a smaller room. But yeah, color, wallpaper, big old patterns, all misconceptions.
Veronica, what about for you?
Yeah, I agree. I always tell people design is like science. I'm a former biology major. And so when I transitioned into design, I like to keep some of that thought process. And so once I found out that there were principles and elements of design, I was like, this is it, So if you can approach a space understanding how to incorporate the colors, the patterns, the scales, then you can't go wrong. It's kind of when you go in and you just throw stuff at the wall and don't really understand how you're utilizing those items. It's when take missteps and you don't have balance or contrast in your color palette and you're just kind of doing red blue red blue red blue or orange purple, but you want to make sure that you're looking at some of those balancing uh, perspectives of principles and elements of design. For like Ron's space, when I painted his bookcase blue, I know he mentioned wanting to keep his space light and airy, and he was really concerned about having dark colors in his space. And I had to help him understand by first explaining that we were going to change the lighting in the space. And lighting makes a huge difference, whether it's natural lighting, ambient, task lighting, or the layers of all of those. It makes a huge difference in how you can utilize dark colors and heavy pieces.
Right.
So like the navy blue bookcase and the navy blue sofa, those are really good grounding pieces that created depth and balance. And by using the right tones and shades of the color, it gave a great sense of value in the space. So it's probably a lot of design jargon that people don't want to hear, but it's how you get to those fabulous pieces that they show you when they're ready to start their project. It's all a scientific thought process.
Well, and I love the color of that bookcase. Like as soon as I saw that photo, my eye immediately went to it. It's just a really beautiful shade of blue.
Thank you. Ron mentioned he loved his cowboys. And I was like, we have to get him his cowboy blues. So I searched high and low to find a color that would work well to match his cowboy blue.
I love it. All right, so you have a floor plan that is starting to take shape. Maybe even before that, how do you decide what kinds of spaces you'll want or need? Like someone is moving into this new chapter of their life, living in a smaller space, and they have these things that they enjoy doing, goals they want to accomplish, but how do you make sure that they're setting themselves up for success in those areas? Kim, do you want to start?
I was going to say, I would add, we're going to have a coin phrase after this, Veronica. You said design is a science, and I love that you said it has a formula, and I 100% agree. I would add there's the word psychology in science, or in design. So design is a science and a psychology. It's all about tracking our behavior. And what is our daily routine? What are we doing? What are our goals in our daily routine? And what are we naturally doing in our daily routine? And that leads us to programming. Programming leads us into floor plan and calculating the space as it should sit for you. But I go back to tracking your behavior. And if you're struggling with defining what areas of your home you actually are using, I would encourage you to get a journal out. Literally, if someone is looking for a food allergy and they're not sure what it is, they're going to track, what did I eat today? And do that for a couple weeks or a month and see what is it that you're actually doing. If one of your goals is to start running every day, you should probably like put your shoes out by the door, right? Make it part of your space, activate that. If you have always wanted to like sew and you have a sewing machine in a corner, but it's collecting the junk mail on the table, that's probably something to maybe let go of in your programming. And so I really would say it's about tracking our behavior. What are we doing and what are our goals, and combining that into creating the best right size for a space.
Yeah, intentionality in it all.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like that.
Well,
Definitely. And hobbies. Like hobbies are one of those things, like how many hobbies do we actually have? And how many do we actually do, right? We like to think we have a hobby, but are we actually doing it? And defining maybe two or three at the most to create space for that because it is about creating a place for joy in our homes.
no, absolutely. And I love that you bring up hobbies. I think that is such an important piece to this because we need to be realistic too about what we are going to do. And I think from what you all have said, you're giving people a realistic idea of what to plan for. Veronica, do you have any additional examples that you might be able to share to help illustrate this idea too?
I do. So going back to Ron's space, I found out as I was clearing his bookcase that he loved poker. And so I found it so amazing that he went down to the dining hall every day to play poker. And he has this wonderful dining table right there next to his bookcase where he held all his tchotchkes. And then I found like a bag of coins and cards. And I was like, this space, this area can be so multi-purpose where he can not only have dinner, but he can, come bring his friends up into his space and play poker. And I think that's just a great idea of one community and one being able to utilize your space in a multidisciplinary way that can support function, playtime, family, friends, and all of those things. So it's really important to be intentional, like Kim was talking about. If you know that you're going to utilize one particular piece of furniture maybe for multiple things, like the leaves of that table drop down and then they would expand up. So if he didn't have the friends over, he can drop the leaves down just for him and maybe
Right.
one other person. But if he was ready to play poker and invite his friends up, he can expand those leaves and then put something on top of the table, enjoy that poker time with his friends.
Well, having more people over too and more community. I love that
Absolutely.
functionality of that table in dual
Yeah.
uses. So
Yeah.
important. So important. So let's talk about stuff with the right mindset. We have an idea of what we want to be doing with our new space, and there's a floor plan in place that kind of takes all of these things into consideration. But now comes what might be the hardest part for a lot of people, and that's sorting through our belongings and deciding what we can bring into this new space. And for me, I went through this with my parents a couple of years ago. They were selling our childhood home after about 38, 39 years. So you can only imagine the stuff that had accumulated in that time. And so I would go visit them in Kentucky, and we'd sort of go take each trip where I was there, we'd take one room. Like, let's just tackle one. The next time I was in town, we'd tackle another. But the really beautiful thing for me was hearing my mom share about what each of these different things were, why they were meaningful in like our family history. And the same thing with my father. And then us start to figure out what are the things you want to take into this new space, what can be given to someone else in the family, and just make some different decisions. So do either of you have any tips on how to approach this step?
Yeah, I can start. So, fun fact is that I actually live in my childhood home right now. It's my home office, it's where I live and I work. And so in 2021, I decided to do a major remodel for my mom. Um, and I knew this would be tough. I knew it would be hard because she had done pieces here and there, but as I had grown in my profession, I knew so much more that I can give her. And knowing my mom, I knew that this would be a little tough. So I knew I had to approach this not with my mindset as a designer, but with a mindset of understanding who she is as an aging senior, as a widow, and as someone who's lived and raised three kids and had a previous husband in this home. So as we started, it was really important for me to have conversation with her.
Yeah.
I really sat down with her, talked about what her needs were, her design style. I have a very contemporary modern style, but she's kind of traditional and she had a lot of found pieces and a lot of antiques that she was still holding from my grandmother. So it was hard to figure out how I was going to blend the style of what I love in the home that I'm now living in, but still respect that she's lived in this home for 40 plus years. I can remember that I needed to put together a room for her because she has so many clothes. Oh my goodness. If anybody needs clothes donations, send me the address. I'm gonna send them to you because I'm trying to get rid of them. But I literally took a bedroom in the home, and I know some people might say this is a no-no, but if you can see in this picture, we kept a day bed because I really wanted to be intentional about the space and make it multifunctional. But I turned this bedroom into her wardrobe. So now we opened up the wall. So there's a pass through right from her bedroom. So now she has a space that she can come in and she can get dressed, she can sit, she can do her makeup at the vanity station. And then I also wanted to give her something that would reflect the history of her being in this home. So we put together this gallery wall for her that shows pictures from her childhood and family, and also her husband's, her past husband. So it was very important for her to be able to still look up and see mementos and photos from every aspect of her life, from her parents to her previous marriage and then to her late husband. So I love that I was able to do that for her.
I mean, listen, Ronica, I'll take that closet. So if you could
I
come to
was
my
about to
house
say.
and do the same thing, like I would love to just sit on my couch in my closet.
Oh
I
my
was thinking
goodness.
the
And be
same
that
thing,
organized.
Ashley. Yeah, I was like, is that a celebrity closet? I mean, let's go. I would trade that.
Listen, it is one of two that I've had to build for her outside of the standard ones that come in homes. So
It's so
help
nice.
me.
Listen, I love she likes to look good. I
She
love it.
does.
That's great. That is such a great approach. And obviously, you're making sure that she gets the things that make her happy and bring back fond memories while also making sure it's presented in a beautiful way. Again, I'm just saying, if you want to come to Nashville, stop by my house. I
I
can use
got
your
you.
help. Okay,
I got you. I
great.
got you. I'm there.
Thank you. Okay, Kim, when we talk about right-sizing new spaces, what are your thoughts on using existing furniture or decor versus buying new items?
Yeah, I feel like this is a soapbox for me. And listening to you, Veronica, it's a good reminder of how personal our space is. My sister and I were going through, we had to sell our childhood home, and my dad had lived in there for 41 years, y'all. 41 years. And he was an antique collector. And we just going through that was very personal. But I found that if I picked something up or if I looked something in it and it sparked joy, then it was worth keeping. And if it didn't, then it was okay to let it go.
Mhm.
And so I feel like reusing pieces is not only good for the earth, it's sustainable. Often antique furniture was better made. I hate to say it, but it's true. And so I'm a big fan of vintage and antique pieces, and repurposing from a sustainability perspective, but also from a legacy perspective.
Mhm.
There is a psychology in the comfort of things as they surround us, and what brings joy and what sparks joy in our hearts is very personal. Like that wardrobe closet. I mean, that I feel like that would spark joy for me. But
It
I
sparked
mean,
joy for me.
I think any woman watching this is like, I would like that. But it's a very personal thing, and so I feel like using existing furniture, I'm such a big fan of that. Using its comfort, it's basically the comfort of things, but also the legacy of an object. So, for example, the furniture piece behind me was actually in our dining room as I was a little girl growing into adulthood, and it's now in my office. And I see that every day when we're taking a meeting, and it brings me joy. It's a piece of my home and my dad and my history in my new space. And so, if we are able to bring pieces with us and they can fit, I feel like it's an absolute win. And if we aren't, I also love the idea of gifting that to someone in our family or a friend so that piece, that object has legs to live on and we can still visit and see it. This is a funny story. We just did an install. We found a vintage painting, and it was on the back. Someone had taken the time to write. They had painted it for a family member in 1974 in Wisconsin. And I found it on Etsy in Sweden. And we just put it up in a space that it's 2024, y'all. It's a 50-year-old painting, and it has traveled the world. Yes. And to me, that's the story of that object. There's beauty in that, there's character. When we invite vintage pieces into our home to help tell our story, it adds joy, happiness, character, even the flaws. I love a vintage piece that has a little flaw to it, because that's like my wrinkles on my forehead. It's like it's my story and I'm sticking to it.
My smile lines.
My smile lines, yeah, the gray hairs and all of it. But there's also pain, and there can be pain and joy, in the letting go. And I've experienced that on a personal level too, of but also just knowing what's bringing joy versus what's sort of literal baggage. And so when we're kind of paring down, I think it's very wise to learn to let go of something if it's not sparking that joy. And so, yeah, I'm a big fan of reusing pieces.
Well, and I love that you talked about even art. Like when we were moving my parents out of their childhood home and moving them into a different house, I mean, they did have to get some new furniture just for the space, and we definitely got rid of a lot of things, which honestly, I'm so grateful we started that process earlier rather than later because it was a lot more manageable for me. And then again, like I said, being able to hear the things and stories from our family that were important to my dad and to my mom. But you know, if I think about the most treasured pieces in my house, my grandmother started painting in her 60s and she passed away in her 70s. And so, you know, I'd actually reached out to a friend of mine that was a designer, and I'm actually interested to hear both of your perspectives on this, especially when we talk about the sensitivity of the person you're talking to. And this painting is beautiful that my grandmother did. And obviously it means so much to me because she's the one that did it. And she passed away about 20 years ago. But I was trying to figure out which frame to put around it. And I remember this designer friend of mine she's wonderful, but she goes, you know, it's not really my style either way because the painting's not my style. And I'm like, I don't care because it's literally about my grandmother painted this and I want this in my house and to proudly display it. So how do you maintain sensitivity with, you know, or how can you give some recommendations to people to maintain sensitivity when you're working with people on these heirlooms that are so important to them?
Yeah, I would say empathy, and Veronica, I want to hear it, but there's such an empathy to it, and making sure that you are listening. As designers, our job is to listen. Don't
Yeah.
you think, Veronica?
I do. And I think it's really important to, if you can, pull them into that process. Again, as sometimes there's this connotation that designers are just going to come in and change things without your input. And I think that's a negative connotation that does not exist. There may be some people who do that, but I don't live by that principle of design. And even more so when it came down to redesigning this home for my mom, I had to be very empathetic to her loss and some of the pieces that were connected to her loss, right?
Yeah.
Both of her
Yes.
husbands are now passed. And so I don't know how she might feel about a piece. And case in point, there was this large recliner that my mom had from her last husband. And I didn't care for it. It wasn't the prettiest thing, but I didn't know how to tell her that I wanted to get rid of this.
Yeah.
And we kind of tossed around the idea of donating it or, not just tossing it out because I don't really believe in throwing away furniture like that. But what do we do with this piece? And so two things had to happen. One, I had to find a replacement. So I took her along with me for that process because I wanted her to be able to understand the who, what, when, where's, and why, right? So she was able to see the pieces that I was thinking about trading out the recliner with, and then she was able to get excited about the process instead of it feeling like oh, you're just getting rid of my piece.
Yeah.
And then secondly, what I was able to do was find a great home for it. My sister, she loves cozy things. And so she was happy to take the piece. And so now every time we go visit my sister, it's a huge recliner, like 3 people can sit in it. So now my mom can revisit that piece, cuddle up, and still feel like she has a piece of her husband with her
Yeah.
without it just being given to a stranger. So yeah.
Yeah.
I
Really.
love that you so sorry, Ashley.
No,
I love
go
that
ahead.
you like ushered her with empathy, and that is such a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
And that is, I think, as designers, that's an honor and a joy that and a privilege that we have in this space to usher people through something, and just to remind ourselves that things can be very personal to people. And if we connect to their story of why it's personal, it's easy for us to understand and to have
Yeah.
empathy to usher.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, I just wanted to share one more thing really quickly. On the flip side, there are these beautiful chairs that were left here. We have a formal sitting room that is now my office, which I'm sitting in, and they had pieces of furniture in it from my grandmother and my mom. One was like a duck and fife sofa, and then there were these beautiful antique Victorian sitting chairs. And I wasn't sure if I was going to keep them, but again, going back through, do you throw out things, you give them away? And something told me to hold on to these chairs. They were my grandmother's, and I actually took pictures of them to an upholsterer, and he gave me the story behind the chairs. There's smoking chairs, and one is for the male, one is for the female, and I'm sitting in the female one. It has like really lower arms, and so that was designed for the women at that time. They wore the big Victorian dresses, and for the men, it has the higher arms for them to rest as they smoked. And so once I heard that story, I was like, I cannot get rid of these chairs. I have to fit them into this design. And I had them reupholstered in this beautiful sapphire fabric. blue velvet and nail heads, and we painted the frame, and now they sit beautifully in this office. So yeah, it's that emotional connection, leading with empathy, understanding how things sometimes can have a new space and face once you just give them a little bit of love.
Well, and I think, we've said it several times now, but just even as a family member, really trying to listen and approach it with empathy and listen to, while it may not be something that's important to me, it might really be important to someone in my family. And then, like you were saying, someone else in the family may want that. So I really think us getting curious and asking really great questions is
Absolutely.
always the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one thing that I was happy in hindsight to be here with my mom. It wasn't my plan to live here, but now I'm happy because I was able to get curious and ask her things. I was able with Ron to sit and ask him things and get curious and find so many nuggets and jewels that we were able to highlight in both spaces.
Kim, I know that you've had a lot of experience with this too. What are some ways that you help people work through this?
Yes, I actually lived in a tiny home for a couple years and I had to pare things down to what is it that I really need. So it's very personal. I find that the wardrobe is often the antithesis of your mom's wardrobe. The wardrobe is a hard place to start because we tend to think we need more than we actually need. But in hindsight, most of us, we might have that favorite one or two pair of jeans, or in my case, it's overalls. um, we have certain things we gravitate to. So one of the exercises that we will do for a client is literally open. I love to travel. It's like I like to relate things to suitcases. I'll open a suitcase, put it on the bed, and say, fit maybe two, maybe it's two suitcases, depending on what part of the country you live in. I'm in Texas. Our weather is never cold, right? But you might have two suitcases and one for each season, and fill that suitcase with the priority wardrobe that you actually wear all the time. That's one exercise. And once it's full, you're done. And it's actually cool because when you think about it and you travel, you have a pared down version of your wardrobe, and it's actually kind of freeing because you're able to enjoy your trip and you don't have literal baggage with you. So that's one exercise for wardrobes that I offer. The other idea is to create, so push everything aside, create an open space in your closet, and as you wear something, hang it in that negative open space. So do this for like maybe a month, 1 month, and you have to maybe do this as a seasonal if you live up north or where it's cold. But you take, you clean it, you put it back in that side of the closet, and after a month, a lot of the things that you have not touched probably could go. The other thing is
I'm laughing, Kim, because I'm a little stressed now.
Am I stressing you out?
I'm a
She
little
went from
stressed.
keeping all the clothes to now you're telling
I
her
was
to
like,
get rid of
wait
something.
a second, I got to get out suitcases and fill them, and then I get rid of it. I'm like, walk me through that again, just a little bit would be great, but it does make me honestly a little bit nervous.
Have anxiety, and that is, I know you're gonna be like, Ashley's like, I'd much rather go with Veronica's closet than Kim. But
I'm
if we're
buying my
really
ticket right now, Ashley. I'm on my way.
Thank
I'm on my
you.
way.
Thank you.
I'm out. It's hard. I mean, it really is. It's giving you anxiety. It is hard, and that's when I would say, okay, if you really are having a hard time doing this for yourself, this is when we phone a friend and we say, hey, I kind of need you to tell me, like, does this even look good on me anymore? Or the other caveat to this that I even before Veronica and I were talking, I hope we really encourage and empower people. One thing that I see a lot in our industry is just this fast fashion, mindset, fast fashion, and we all see it. This is where vintage clothing comes back into play, repurposing, donating, like, your mom's things. And that is a way we can be more sustainable, also give things longer life. My personal mission this is a vintage dress. Like, most of my wardrobe are vintage pieces because I want to create sustainability in our industry. If you can take that mindset from a fashion standpoint in our wardrobe and apply it to decor, it's kind of a beautiful thing because we're no longer like tempted to just flip through a catalog of a certain, mass manufacturer. It's less about picking a bunch of items to fill the space, and it's more about repurposing things that help tell our story, that like look and feel good on us, if that makes sense. So less is more would be my closet version.
Well, and I think about, you mentioned with the closet going through and trying stuff on and phoning a friend or having someone go through it with you. And I think in the past when I've tried to go through a closet, I'm like, okay, let's be realistic. Like, what are the things I'm actually wearing? Because I am notorious for just keeping things in my closet that I wore for a long time. And in my head, I think I wore it 2 years ago, but then I look at photos, I'm like, oh, the last time I wore this was 7 years ago. Like, this is silly. Like, I can part with some of these things. But I love what you were saying, and just it goes back to it being an extension of who we are. And so sometimes you grow out of those things in one way or another, and that could be literally or figuratively, and it's just time to let some things go and be able to really maximize your space. It's just some mindset, like a really great mindset to think about.
Exactly. And if you make space, maybe you can go get something else. I mean, there's, you know,
Something that feels a little bit better. Who knows?
yes, for the right time. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Well, what are some ways you can maximize your space while holding on to the memories that are near and dear to us? Like, how can we still enjoy those memories or even keep track of important documents or photos while trying to maximize our space?
This is a hard one. I am 43 years old, and I have photo album on photo album on photo album. So in some ways, I'm going to be a hypocrite in this space. But I'm going to be honest. I love my grandmother's and great grandmother's photos. But I have seen, the idea of digitizing documents. Paper clutter is something that we saw my dad collect over time. My grandparents, they would keep receipts and keep documents that you don't necessarily need to keep anymore. If we can start getting in the habit of digitizing paperwork and documents, it does free up space for those more joyful things than like insurance documents. Like I don't want to see that, and it collects dust. Digitizing documents, digitizing our family photos actually does create a space for easier and better organization. Oftentimes we can find it better, easier, faster, and it's not collecting dust in a box, because that's what it ends up doing. So that's one of my suggestions, even though I'm not taking my own advice. So
Well, honestly, as you were talking, I was like, is this where I need to confess that? And my family makes fun of me that I also have all of my grandmother's old 8-track tapes and her 8-track player.
amazing.
But then I also have all of these CDs that I act like I'm going to display somewhere one day when I have a much bigger house and big bookshelves. And I do have all my grandmother's old records too. I'm like, the records and the 8-tracks I'll for sure keep. But my family makes fun of me. They're like, you are never going to listen to those CDs again. I'm like, but they look good in these plastic containers that I keep in storage. And it's just hard to let go of those things. Maybe one day I'll do it. But in talking about the digitizing photos, I love documenting, our family gatherings and really trying to keep track of all that. And for a long time, I would print it all off. But the digitizing photos and videos and VHS has also allowed me to share those memories with other members of the family and then being able to really enjoy them as well. So I do think digitizing photos is really helpful.
I agree. There's a word I thought of when you were talking, Ashley, and it's nostalgia.
Yeah.
There is, so if you have 28 tracks and they're bringing you some joy, there is permission to keep a couple, right? Because maybe
it's your first concert or something, like
yes,
in
like
terms of
out
like
of the
CDs. Yeah.
stack. Exactly. Out of the stack. If it's there, the chemical response to nostalgia is important.
Yeah.
And so if we can hang on to a couple of those things and it still creates that same physical reaction for us, there's value in that. We just don't need like the whole stack of it.
Yeah, and like Kim said earlier, be intentional about it. So maybe Ashley, you go through and you take some of the ones that you love. Maybe keep 100. They have these great CD books, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know because I used to have one. And what I did was I put it in my car. And so what I would do is if I had a long drive, on every drive, maybe even the night before, I would go get that CD and make sure that it's already in. So I knew that I would use and listen to this instead of just saying, oh, I'm going to hold on to these. No, I'm going to make sure they're in the place where I like to listen to music, and then I'm going to pop them in.
Yep.
But to also piggyback off of what Kim was saying about support and help bringing someone in when you're clearing out your closet, I think it's really important to, whether you're downsizing or you just need somebody to tell you, girl, you haven't touched that in 6 months, get rid of it. It's really important to have that community. And a lot of people try to go for it themselves. And that's why you have wardrobes that look like my mom's. She just won't listen. And it's like, so what I do is every probably 4 to 6 months, I'll kind of find my way onto the day bed and as she's getting ready and like, have you not worn that in a long time? Let's pull that out. And I just all of a sudden will have a pile. And so she kind of love hates me for it. But I think that's when she realized, yeah, I haven't touched these in like 2 years and they don't even fit anymore. Okay, so now we're getting that out of there.
Yeah.
And then after I started doing that calculating, then she would come to me during seasons and be like, will you come help me? I want to clear out my closet. And so I just feel like sometimes we don't utilize who we have, we don't utilize our community, and community can come outside of family and friends. Maybe it's your church community. You just never know until you ask. And it can sometimes make all the difference of keeping something for the right amount of time to holding on to things that you don't need for 10, 15, 20 years.
Well, and I know we keep saying it, but it just keeps going back to the mindset and the design of the entire
Mhm.
space and trying to maintain that. What are some of the services that you recommend for helping to digitize photos and other memories? I know it's a huge
Oh,
space saver, but it's really hard to keep paper anymore. So how can we lessen that and try and really digitize some of the photo albums and other things that are really important?
yeah. I don't like clutter myself. So I found this website called Shoeboxed, and I love it. They have these great little magic envelopes, is what they call them. So, depending on your plan, you can submit your objects in the magic envelopes. I usually use it for business cards because I do a ton of networking and I'm always coming home with a stack of business cards. And I got tired of trying to keep up with the spreadsheet myself. So, all I do is put the postcards, business cards in this magic envelope, send it off to them. They digitize it, put it in a CSV format, and then they send it back to me. And that's something I can easily upload and I can use it for digital marketing. So you can use it for documents, photos, and then that way, because they do all types of documents, not just business cards for that type of format. But yeah, you can do it for photos, and then that way, as we are into this more digital age, you're lessening the amount of clutter that you have to keep. But I'm kind of with Kim. Like you want to keep some photo albums. Like
Mhm.
Ron had tons of photo albums, and I've had true nostalgic moments sitting there going through his photo albums.
Right.
So there's a balance between them both. You just have to know when it's time to create that balance.
Absolutely. Kim, what about for you?
Yeah, there's a website called Trustworthy that I know you can upload your insurance documents and kind of all that paperwork that's very important to life. And it's a vault. It's basically like a family documents vault where it's organized, and if you have a spouse or a partner, then they can have access to it too, which I think is really good. If you're anything like me, it's like the husband is like, "Where is this stuff?" Um, and then there's one called Memory Forward. My personal note, I lost my mom when I was 10. My husband found an old VHS of her last Christmas. And like 2 years ago, he had that digitally converted. There's a website called Memory Forward, and you can send in your VHS and they can make it into a digital file. It was by far one of the coolest gifts I've ever received because I can see her and it's in a format that's more applicable to life as it is now, where I can see
Mm.
it on my computer rather than like pull out an old VHS that's collecting dust and doesn't
Mm.
work anymore. So I also love Artifact Uprising.
Hmm.
I'll do like they have really beautiful photo albums, so you can take all your digital prints and then put it into that, just to collect everything into one space.
I love that. I love it so
I do
much.
too.
Okay, you have both talked about earlier, talking about design tools like paint and wallpaper that can make a space feel larger. Do you have any ideas or examples of way to make a space more versatile,
Ooh, yes.
Kim?
Well, yeah, versatile. I would say, I mean, it goes back to our homes are kind of like fashion, right? If I have a small space or if I have a short ceiling, or say like I'm under 5 feet tall. I'm probably not going to wear stripes running this way because I want to look taller. So I'm going to wear stripes that go run vertically. It's sort of the same application in a space where if the walls or ceilings are short, doing a striped wallpaper running up can actually elongate the space. In this particular photo, we did the siding running across the ceiling to make it look longer. This is an actual tiny home that I lived in. And, one thing is, so this kitchen island actually on the left side, it serves as three pieces. So it's one piece of furniture that serves as three functionalities. It's a kitchen island. It's on casters. You can turn it. There it is. You can turn it, and the table flips up. So now it's in dining table mode. And then also I used it as my home office and desk. And then I have it's three different areas. You can move it around the kitchen so that it's creating more versatility in the object. I think our minds are trained to believe one object has one purpose. When you're doing smaller spaces, we have to think way more creatively and with more versatility in mind and functionality. One object like the kitchen island can serve three purposes in a smaller space, and therefore like reducing clutter.
No, absolutely. Ronica, what about for you?
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like the approach, again, going back to Ron's bookcase, wanting to make sure from that scientific approach of color and grounding his space and being having cognitive perception of what that bookcase means for him. So understanding that not only does it hold some of his most treasured mementos, but that is a space of gathering. That's a space of reflection and remembering. So that color meant so much to him. It could mean, some people would think, oh, it's just a paint color. Yeah, but that meant so much to him. When you were looking at a blank canvas, and sometimes when the walls are all so monotone, you don't really know where to, lay your eye. And this gave him a place to understand that this is the spot where I can see my mementos. It's not fighting for balance and color, but it's really highlighting everything that he had. So I like to do an exercise sometimes when we're talking about colors and patterns and textures and being really Lord, I lost my word, but being really intentional about how
Yes.
we use them. I'll take the clients into their closet and we'll pull out, some of the things that they love and they like, and then we'll understand how we can use some of those colors and patterns in spaces. And fashion and interiors they're so relatable. And a lot of times people don't relate that. So the same way that you may use those patterns, and like Kim said, she doesn't really use um, horizontal stripes or vertical stripes. It's the
Right.
same principle that we can use in our spaces.
Well, not everyone, as we know, has an innate sense of design. So, what are some ways that people can find inspiration and ideas for designing their space?
So going back to that, using their closet, yeah, using their closet as a space to really understand what they like in interiors. It's a misstep that I think is a fun activity that I like to share with my clients, and they think I'm crazy, especially the husbands. Uh, but I take the husbands to their side of the closet too, and I'm like, look at that crocodile belt. Don't skip on
Love it.
those shoes with the spikes that you have. I see them. Let's not miss them. But with
Especially in
women,
Texas.
especially in Texas,
Yes.
we have our boots and we have our special occasion shoes. And so I'm like, why did you buy that? You love it, right? It's the same approach that we can look at for our interiors. And so I don't say I love the bling, but I do love to accentuate. And so if a person tells me that they, love diamonds, how can we incorporate that bling into a space through a pillow cover or through a fixture, a chandelier? So inspiration is all around us. And a lot of times, if we can look at those sources like fashion, then you can incorporate that into your design.
What are your thoughts on incorporating plants into a space? Do you have any suggestions for choosing the right kind of plants for a space and how to care for them?
Ooh,
No, I'm gonna let Kim take this one because as you see what her life is like. Let me tell you, these are faux, these are not real. We will not be keeping anything alive around here.
I love it.
So
oh
we
my
gonna let
gosh.
Kim take that.
It took a while, but I feel like my green thumb is like my grandmother is coming back through my thumbs. I love plants, and I feel like they offer so much air quality in our homes and like literal life. So we always we incorporate plants. I am a big fan of, especially in smaller spaces, bringing the outdoors in and really trying to open the walls, bringing in the natural light. And ways to do that is definitely through plants. Some people can have a lot of anxiety when you say like I'm going to bring plants to your space. They think it's going to add complexity in their daily routine. There are a number of low maintenance plants that I love using. I think we have some picture. There's one, yeah, fiddle leaf fig is great. Succulents, they don't even want water. So guess what? You don't even have to water them. It's like they wish they lived in the desert. So they're a great plant. I love using pothos. So pothos are, and there's different varieties, but they're really reactive, and if they need water they show it, they wilt, and then it's actually, it gives a lot of instant gratification because when you water them they perk back up, and so it's really beautiful. I love surrounding our home with plants. This is our little tiny house. It creates texture and color and greenery and air quality, and
Yeah.
I would encourage people to not be afraid of the maintenance side. There's another plant called a ZZ that's really low maintenance. That's it, actually, right there. Super low maintenance. You really don't have to water it, but once every couple weeks. You definitely have to pay attention to natural light and look to see what that plant requires in terms of natural light. But I highly encourage plant life. I even love putting them in the bathrooms. Let's just surround myself with plants all the time.
I love it. Ronica, I feel like you could get a cactus and be fine.
Listen, I think I've tried Ashley and it died. I have a black thumb, so there's still lots of work to do around my space. But for my clients, I absolutely love and appreciate when they bring in greenery, whether it's live or faux. And I've done a mix, but I that's a very personal thing to me for them. And like how Kim talked about all the spaces and places and types and names. I don't know any of that, but if they do, I'm like, okay, let me get you some fabulous pots and we're going to make it work. Uh, but if you leave it up to me, and if you're like me and you have a black thumb or you don't, know how to maintain live plants, then I love to source faux. I've gotten really good about, and the industry has gotten really good about showcasing realistic faux plants, trees and plants. And so that's what we incorporate into the space. Even flowers, like I said, the ones behind me are faux. So I don't like to, leave it to chance, but I love to see it. And so I think that whether you have a green thumb and you can keep up the live plants and trees, or if you don't, like me, incorporate the greenery into the space. It is a great element that uplifts a space. It adds color, it adds texture, and it fills spaces like crazy. Like you put a tree in a corner in a large decorative pot, and it can really take that space from drab to fab in an instant. So I do love incorporating greenery.
I love you said drab to fab in an
Yeah.
instant. I'm here
Yeah.
for it. I'm here for it. The other thing I think about is that the one thing that plants and humans have in common is that we both need light. So how can lighting affect a space, and what tips do you have for those who maybe have not considered designing their lighting before?
Yeah, lighting is major for me.
Mhm.
I truly believe that in order to appreciate and love your space, it has to be lit properly. So that's like number one that I approach, number one thing that I approach in a design project, that we're going to understand how your space needs to be lit, what type of pieces. Some people are collectors of art. And so you really want to make sure that you're highlighting them in the appropriate way. And so I always start a project understanding, okay, what are we doing with lighting? So with Ron's space, I walked in and he had just the incandescent bulbs, and I immediately knew that I wanted to change out his light fixtures. So we brought in a new LED lit ceiling fan and a new track light for over his dining table. And because he had those two bookcases in his dining nook, I knew that I wanted to be able to, and he had a really special piece of art also. So I knew I wanted to be able to do some directional lighting that would highlight all the mementos in his bookcases, highlight his table because he needed to be able to see what
Right.
he's eating, and then highlight that special piece of artwork. So making sure that you have all layers of light, natural. He had great natural light flooding into his space, but making sure that we layered those lights. So lamps, ceiling fans with light kits, and then, like I said, that track lighting, super important.
I love that. I love that. What for anyone watching at home, I want to make sure we're about to get into our live Q&A. So if you're watching and you have questions for Kim or Veronica about space and designing your space, make sure to put those questions in the chat. Kim, do you want to have anything about lighting you want to talk about?
Yes, I could have a whole another hour about lighting, but we'll keep it brief. We Lighting is critical, and I would say this is where we lean on the professionals too. I like to think of lighting as theatrical. There's elements of lighting. Use the word layer, Veronica. 100% agree. Lighting is a way to add mental health to the space. Depending on color, temperature, warmer lighting creates cozy space. We use lighting to activate a home for different times of day and different activities in the home. When you're, waking up, putting on makeup, that's a different type of lighting than when you're home and reading a book and cozying up in a nook in a corner, in a sofa. And so lighting definitely is a tool to activate the various parts of your home. And I think layering is the key word. Creating ambient lighting versus form and functional lighting, there we layer both. And then color temperature is something I would say is 100% necessary. I We skew toward 2700 or 3000 Kelvin, and that just keeps a nice soft cozy glow throughout a home. And it's also decorative, but I would say for the most part it's a theatrical moment to be able to create dimension and layer and activity throughout the space.
That's a great way to put it.
I love that. I love that. Because I start to think about makeup lighting. I'm like, what do I need for makeup lighting? What do I need for my living room or dining room? What do I want for, the guest bathroom? So I do agree with you. I was like, lighting is so important. It's so important.
And it directly relates to our eyes too, right?
Mhm.
So there's a physical and mental health aspect. When you're putting on makeup, you need it in the front. When you're reading, you need it task lighting. When you have a piece of art and you want to highlight it, that's a decorative moment. So there's a lot of opportunities in lighting.
What are some of the considerations you would recommend when you're thinking about choosing furniture for someone who may have specific accessibility needs? Veronica, do you want to start?
Yeah, accessibility is really important when you're designing for those needs. I love to approach aging in place is really important. Like I said, I live with my mom, so understanding how her needs are going to shift and change, seat heights, range heights, reach heights, all of those things are really key and important. We recently did. Well, actually, in my home, and then for a client, we did two ADA remodels of bathrooms. And it was important for me to understand what each client needs. And in this space, what we did was not only take out the bathtub so they can have a curbless shower, but we also got a 22-inch high toilet. This particular senior wanted a higher toilet. And so we sourced one that was going to be specifically easy for her to get up and off the toilet seat. And then grab bars have come a long way, and that toilet paper holder is actually a grab bar.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, it's beautiful and functional. So if she ever has any trouble, instead of having those standard, because this is a residential space, we didn't have to really follow the strict codes of commercial. So instead of having those two grab bars behind the toilet on the side, I was able to put in that toilet paper holder that is a grab bar. And then, of course, her shower had the grab bars that she need, but we also did her bench at a higher height for her. So making sure that you focus on accessibility in spaces. This floating counter was brought in for long-term thought for my mom if she ever needed to come in and be in a wheelchair. And then of course there is now a shower glass on this shower, but when I first remodeled the bathroom, I really wanted to keep the shower glass out because the whole shower is tiled, and so we can always squeegee the water in. But most important is that she would be able to easily roll in if she was ever in that space of being in a wheelchair and not be blocked with having to get in and out of a tub.
Well, and that space is so beautiful. And I love, like, you talk
Thank
about
you.
really thinking ahead of what this space may need to be in 2, 5, 10 years down the road.
Yeah.
It's really
Mhm.
important. Kim, what about for you?
Yeah, I would say scale is a skill. Try saying that 3 times. Scale is a skill, and it's one of our responsibilities as a designer to create and maintain standards for accessibility for really any age. We're all growing older at the end of the day, and it's about clearances and turning radiuses and the grab bars. I agree have come a really long way, and creating enough space, even in a kitchen, from the sink to the island, making sure that path feels clear for functionality and overform. And so accessibility is a critical path for any age, but also as we grow. And I we use certain standards throughout all of our projects that are basically almost ADA compliant throughout. And we do that with the mindset of, look, someone could be in an accident and be temporarily put into a wheelchair, and they need to be able to access their home in a manner that's comfortable still for them. So it's a responsibility for us, and it's one of the reasons I would recommend, you know, to hire a designer.
Absolutely. And that leads me actually into our next question. I think there are probably a lot of people that feel overwhelmed with the thought of having to figure out a new space. So even if they have the help of friends and family, they may not have someone helping them who has the level of experience that a dedicated designer might have. So what would each of you say could be the value of working with a designer? And what are tips that do you have for finding someone to start working with? Or things to look out for, questions to ask?
Yeah, I'll start with the tips part. I think that for anyone who may be looking to downsize to transition their living, um, start with that center and see if they have a referral sheet for you. It can be cumbersome to find out who is the right designer to work with. Like I said earlier, there's a difference between a decorator and designer. And a lot of time when you're looking to make those structural changes in a space, you want to work with a designer who understands those needs, not just not just from the design side, but also from a construction side. So I would say, approach the facility and see if they have a referral sheet of designers that and I think it's a good rule of thumb for any facilities to have that on hand to be able to say, this is who we recommend. Here's a starting point. Also, you have to be very transparent in your needs. There was one thing that I struggled with my mom. And finally, after some time, I asked the hard question. I said, are you having a hard time getting old? And she said, I am. And
Mm.
so that helped me really, have a different approach the conversation different and to be able to talk about her needs and her wants and her wishes in a very empathetic and sympathetic way. Not empathetic because I'm older but not there yet, but in a very sympathetic way to be able to understand that her needs right now are not my needs. And so but I wanted her to feel comfortable to be her most vulnerable and transparent with me so that I could help her.
Yeah.
And that goes for anyone who's working on a project. You have to be transparent. The designer has to be able to know your needs to be able to support you so that you can function in your space at your best.
Absolutely. Kim, what about for you?
Yeah, I think back to some of the best compliments I've gotten from clients, and that was, it's like you got in my head and created my dream space, and I couldn't have done it without you. And for me, it's like that's the biggest gift I can hear in my career path, that I know I'm giving back and that I know my job and role has a purpose. It is a skill set, and it's a learned, it's a trade, it's something, people like Ronica and I have studied. It is not a hobby, it is a career path for us. And so you can end up, by hiring a professional and leaning in and letting someone help you, you can end up saving money. I mean, I've seen so many people buy a piece of furniture and they can't even fit it through the front door. Like, we've all made that mistake. And so, so you can save time and money. And then, just really leaning into letting someone navigate the puzzle pieces for you. because the stress of right sizing is stressful in itself. So I would invite you to let a professional help navigate it to make it more streamlined, easier, and honestly, hopefully, a better result in the end.
Okay, well, I want to ask, we've got a couple questions from our audience, so I want to make sure we get to these. What am I supposed to do with all of the things we end up getting rid of? And I know you touched on this briefly earlier, but could you guys recap that real quick?
Yeah, I'll start. I would say if it's something special, an heirloom piece, I would encourage you to gift it to someone that you care about, whether it's a friend or family member. If there's no special, like, value to it, sentimentality to it, I would donate it to. There's so many resources. It depends on where you live, but there's a lot of resources. And maybe we can drop that in somewhere, Habitat for Humanity or Creative Reuse. Things like that, Goodwill, where you can donate so that someone else can benefit from that item. I would start with donating to a family or friend, and secondarily to, the last thing we want is to fill our landfill with something that someone else could have used in their
Yeah,
home.
that's a great
Yeah,
point.
I think donating is so important. I've worked with the organization here in Houston for many years, the Houston Furniture Bank. And what I love about that organization is they have a subsidiary of it called the Divas, and I'm a part of the Divas, and it's comprised of decorators and artists and designers. And so, what we're able to do with all of the donated items from bedding to accessories, lightings, and um, mirrors and so forth and so on, beds, really important. But we're able to do 1 day makeovers for people as they're transitioning and getting new housing, and it's one of the most special moments, and we can't do that without the donations of so many generous people. And we get some great items, and I know for a lot of the first part of my career in doing this, I got so much joy from talking to people and saying, thank you for letting me know about this organization. I didn't want to just throw this piece out, or I tried to give it to a family member and they didn't need it or want it. So, really donating pieces can change the lives of someone that you don't even know, and really make a difference.
Absolutely,
100%.
absolutely. What do you all think about an aging in place specialist, like someone who is a certified specialist that is familiar with accessibility and people who are downsizing? How can someone work with a specialist in downsizing or aging?
I think that's great. I actually want to get my CAP certification. Um, you know, having that, it's a unique approach, and it's mindset, it's specialized design, it's a really important tool to have. And I think that if you can work with a certified agent and place specialist, that it will be very highly beneficial to that transition. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I have not ever personally worked with one, but I can see that there would be incredible value there. I also think of a designer client relationship as such a personal thing. So when you're looking for that referral or who to hire, it's really about intuition and connection. To because it is sort of a partnership. Like you're jumping into this project together, and you're wanting someone that can listen to your needs and
Absolutely.
apply them to the space.
Okay, ladies, we have covered so much today. This has been the best conversation. Ronica, Kim, thank you so much for your time and for sharing so many valuable insights with our audience. We just cannot thank you enough.
This is great. I learned so much myself. Thank
I know.
you.
I feel like I have two new friends. I love
Yes.
You do.
Listen, y'all come to Nashville, I'll come to Texas. Either way.
Let's
Either
do
way.
it.
Let's
Get
Well,
that
we know
wardrobe
who's doing.
started.
I was about to say we know who's doing your wardrobe. So
Yeah.
Get your suitcases ready.
That's right. One's got the suitcases, one's got the closet. It's fine.
Right.
We'll figure it. There'll be balance, guys. Balance.
it's all about balance. But
That's
this was
right.
so fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, you can learn more about Ronica at the links that you see here on the screen, as well as on Make It Mine at brookdale.com/Make It Mine. And you can learn more about Kim at the links you see here as well. Thank you both again for such a great discussion on design. We're so grateful for your insight and just expert eye.
Thank you,
Thank
Ashley.
you.
Absolutely. All right, for all of you watching at home, this webcast will be available to watch again at any time on the Brookdale YouTube channel. Please share this with your friends, family, caregivers, or anyone else that you think would find it helpful. Join us on Tuesday, September 17th at 2 p.m. Central Time for our next webcast, Creativity Fuel for Living. It's going to be an incredible discussion. You do not want to miss it. And you can register for this event at brookdale.com/webcast. Thank you for joining us on Grateful Life. We will see you soon.